Y'all smell that? It's the sweet, sweet smell of VidNotes time. Once again, it's Unit 8, Lesson 5. Please get out your 8-5 VidNotes. Today, we're going to be talking about the outcomes of World War II. And the outcomes of World War II include a trial for all of the Nazi leaders who are left, and that's called the Nuremberg trials. What punishment do they get? And also the United Nations comes out of World War II, another peacekeeping organization. Does this fare better than the League of Nations? Well, let's find out. First, two guiding questions. What were the outcomes of World War II? And then, how did the winners, the Allied powers, treat the losers, Germany and Japan? Here we go. Let's have some background here on the outcomes first. The outcomes of World War II included the Nuremberg war crimes trials, the division of Europe, plans to rebuild Germany and Japan, and the establishment of international cooperative organizations. So, Germany has Hitler out of power, and Japan has Hideki Tojo and Emperor Hirohito out of power. What happens to them? Let's see. What were the 7 outcomes of World War II? One was the loss of empires by European powers. Britain loses India after World War II. There's India. France loses the African country of Algeria, which is in northern Africa here. And Italy loses Ethiopia, which is in Eastern Africa here, the country that Mussolini helped to invade. Another outcome of World War II is the establishment of 2 major world powers. These powers emerge. The United States, here they are, the capitalistic economy of the United States and Uncle Sam. And the bear is the symbol of the Soviet Union. They remain a communist country, and these are the 2 superpowers that the world sees after the Second World War. Number 3, the Nuremberg war crimes trial is another outcome. Here is Nuremberg, Germany, in southern Germany, and this crimes trial determined what was to happen with those who planned and executed the Holocaust. And here is a picture of some of the Nazi leaders who are in court listening to a translation of the judges who are describing the Nuremberg trials. It was a series of trials from 1945 to 1946. They prosecuted the prominent remaining leaders of Nazi Germany. Remember, Hitler committed suicide. Some of his other top commanders also committed suicide. What were their charges? Crimes against humanity, war crimes, and creating a war of aggression. Remember, the Nazis invaded Poland. They invaded other lands like France. So they started this war. Some of the notable defendants, Mr. Goering, he was Hitler's second in command. Mr. Frick, he was the author of the Nuremberg laws, which basically said we must prejudice the Jews. Mr. Frank, he was the Nazi leader of occupied Poland. And Mr. Kaltenbrunner, he was the last leader of the SS, which was the Nazi police who rounded up Jews and other minorities. He also commanded the Einsatzgruppen, who executed Jews and other minorities. What was the results of the Nuremberg trials? Only 22 Nazis were tried, and 11 were sentenced to the death penalty. 3 had life in prison, and 3 were acquitted of their crimes. They were not found guilty. The judges who handed down these sentences to these men were from the Soviet Union, the US, France, and Britain. All of the Allied powers were leaders of the Nuremberg trials. Another outcome was a division of Europe and the creation of the Iron Curtain. Let's start with a division of Europe, specifically the division of Germany and its largest city, Berlin, which was divided among 4 Allied powers. How so? Let's look at this map. Britain gets this area here in yellow. America gets this area here in light green. France gets this area to the west in darker green. And the Soviet Union gets this area in East Germany. And if you look at Berlin, let's zoom in on the city itself. East Berlin is controlled by the Soviet Union. The United States gets this chunk of West Berlin. Britain gets this chunk of West Berlin, and France gets this chunk of West Berlin. A democratic government is installed in West Germany and West Berlin, which is the dark green. And West Germany emerges as an economic power in post-war Europe. So let's talk now about the creation of this Iron Curtain. Where does this phrase come from? It comes from the British Prime Minister. Here he is, Winston Churchill. In a speech he gives in America, he says, from Stettin in the Baltic to Trieste in the Adriatic, an Iron Curtain has descended across the continent of Europe, he means. And here's a political cartoon that shows Winston Churchill peeking under this Iron Curtain, and it says, no admittance by order, Joe. Joseph Stalin, that is. And the Soviet Union flag is here on the other side of this, is where the Soviet Union is. Europe is on the other side, of course. When he says Stettin in the Baltic, this is what he means. And in the Adriatic, he means this. This dark black line is the Iron Curtain. Everything to the west is the NATO territory. North Atlantic Treaty Organization is the US and its Western allies. And everything to the east of the Iron Curtain, that is Warsaw Pact land. That is the Soviet Union and its satellite countries. All of the countries around the Soviet Union that support it and signed a pact called the Warsaw Pact. Another outcome of World War II was the establishment of the United Nations in 1945. Here's their logo. The Allies rejected the idea of restoring the League of Nations. Remember, the League of Nations failed. Here's a gravestone that shows that failure. But what's the difference then between the League of Nations and the United Nations? Well, the United Nations was stronger than the League of Nations. The US was involved and agreed to be a member here. And the United Nations was controlled by 5-member Security Council: the US, France, Great Britain, Russia, and China. And any member of the United Nations could veto a resolution. So the members had more say. And here's Harry Truman, US President during 1945, and he is holding hands with Lady Liberty, who has an assault rifle. What? Well, the United Nations has more military power, and they have a lot more power overall than this League of Nations, which failed. Another outcome of World War II was the establishment of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights by the United Nations in 1948. What was this Universal Declaration of Human Rights? It provided a code of conduct for the treatment of people under the protection of their government. And it was aimed to prevent another Holocaust. It is now written in 464 languages or dialects. In other words, it's an important document for everyone around the world. And a big champion of this document, who helped to write it and get it through, was Franklin Roosevelt's wife, Eleanor Roosevelt. Here she is looking at a copy of the Declaration in Spanish. The 7th outcome of World War II is its peace plan. And this peace plan is so much better than World War I's Treaty of Versailles. World War II's peace plan is called the Marshall Plan. It's named after this US General George Marshall. And George Marshall is a Secretary of State who won the Nobel Peace Prize for this plan. And fun fact, he lived at Dodonna Manor in downtown Leesburg, Virginia. We have a Virginian winning the Nobel Peace Prize because of his plan after World War II. Let's look at it. It's the American plan to help European economies recover. The US gives $13 billion to Europe. The Soviet Union refuses the money. England gets the most, gets 24% of this money. France gets 18% of this money. And the overall goal of the Marshall Plan was to prevent the spread of communism in Europe. The United States had a motive in giving out all of this money. From Europe to Asia and Japan. How did America rebuild Japan? It felt a responsibility after it dropped these 2 atomic bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki to rebuild this country. So here's how it did it. U.S. Commander Douglas MacArthur, here he is, helps establish a democratic government in Japan, and he and his helpers rebuild Japan to a dominant economy once again. So Douglas MacArthur is the supreme Allied commander in the Pacific, and here he is reading a speech at the surrender of Japan on September 2nd, 1945. So MacArthur, as I said, is the overall general in charge, and he helps create a new constitution for the Japanese, which is still in use today. MacArthur also eliminates the Japanese offensive military capabilities. America has seen enough of Japan's military, and the responsibility is given to the U.S. to protect Japan. We are finished, ladies and gentlemen, with Lesson 5. Please work on those summary questions to earn 30 out of 30 points. And when you're done with that, you are finished. On to Unit 9. Until that time, this is Mr. Deegan signing off.